I did this here a couple of years ago, and things haven't gotten a whole lot better since then, so I thought we might want to take a look at it again. What brought it to my mind was the judge on the Fifth Circuit that was invited to speak at Stanford by a conservative group of law students, and he was shouted down by some folks that didn't want him to even express his views because his views were offensive to them. So I thought we ought to look at what the New Testament says on that topic about being offended or giving offense. So we're going to look at that again this morning. It's a phrase that's used every day. People are offended by speech. In fact, it gets so bad that in college campuses, some have safe rooms where if there's a speaker on campus that offends you just by being there, you can go to a safe room and find a coloring book. And you think I'm exaggerating. I'm not exaggerating. There are some places that will provide, even though the campus is large and you can go to your dorm room, you got to go someplace so you can be safe. That claiming to be offended, though, is actually a way of trying to gain power over someone else. We see it with people claiming racism where none exist. They're trying to shut down a conversation that they don't want the ideas expressed. And if you haven't ever looked up the Karpman triangle, in a Karpman triangle you have someone who's playing the role of victim. You have someone who the victim believes is their persecutor, and they're looking for someone to be their rescuer. And as I learned about the Karpman triangle years ago, the person instructed me, said the only way to win that game is just don't play. If someone wants you to be their rescuer, don't play. If they're claiming you're the persecutor, don't play. Don't give the victim that kind of power. Over the years, there's been many things that people have found to be offensive. Back in the 50s and maybe even into the 60s, married couples on television were not shown sleeping in the same bed. There were twin beds. You go watch an old episode of I Love Lucy or Leave It to Beaver or some of those 50 sitcoms, you're going to find that there's twin beds in each room because they didn't want to offend somebody. And then it progressed to folks who were offended by nudity and foul language in movies, and those making the movies can't understand why some of us are offended by that, and some try to be as offensive as possible. Women wearing slacks. That, many years ago, even in my lifetime, women did not wear slacks to church. These days, I don't know anybody's offended by it. Merry Christmas. A few years ago, that was going around, that if you said Merry Christmas to someone, they were offended, and they tried to shut down the conversation. Recently, Sam Smith at the Grammys came out dressed in what was supposedly a satanic outfit and had his devil's angels on the stage with him. And then the most recent ones are the drag shows for children that are causing people to be offended that you would have that kind of sexualized performance for little kids. And then those who are being told you ought not do that are offended because you're trying to suppress me or oppress me. So let's take a look at the words in the New Testament. The word offend in the Greek is scandalizo, which you see the word scandal in the word. In Strong's it says it's to put a snare in the way, hence to cause to stumble or give offense. Some of the readings that I'm going to have from the Bible in a moment will use the word stumble in the New American Standard, and it uses give offense in the Old King James. It's the same word. In Thayer's, it says it can also mean to cause one to feel displeasure at a thing, to make indignant, and that's the way we see it. Most of the examples that I gave a few moments ago would be the second definition. In James 2 and James 3, it uses teo. I assume the P is silent, but I don't know. To cause to stumble, or to stumble. And that is, in James 2, it was whoever keeps the whole law and fails in one point stumbles, and the tongue causes people to stumble. So with that in mind, let's take a look at a few verses. In Matthew 18, in verse 6, this is offense coming from without. That is, someone else causing the offense. New American Standard, but if whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to stumble, it would be better for him to have a heavy millstone hung around his neck and be drowned in the depth of the sea. And like I said, the old King James uses the word, whoever shall offend one of these little ones. And that tells us today that we ought not cause someone to stumble who is a believer. That's what Jesus is saying, who causes one of the little ones who believe in me to stumble. That is, cause them to lose their salvation by our conduct. But Jesus also addressed, in the same passage, things from within. He talks about if your hand or foot causes you to stumble, cut it off, throw it away from you. It's better you enter life crippled or lame than to have 2 hands and 2 feet and be cast in the eternal fire. And if your eye causes you to stumble, pluck it out, throw it away from you. It's better not to have that eye. Now, we recognize that as hyperbole. I don't believe Jesus was teaching self-mutilation would be a way to get thoughts out of your head, because that's what this is. These are things that you are thinking of internally that are causing you to fall away from the faith, to be offended, as the King James Version says. So we have the without and the within that are causing you to lose your salvation, lose your faith. Then in John, we're going to look at the indignant part. John 6, 60 and 61. After teaching about eating his flesh and drinking his blood, Jesus said, therefore, many of his disciples, when they heard this, said, this is a difficult statement. Who can listen to it? Jesus, conscious his disciples, grumbled at this, said, does this cause you to stumble? I mean, this was his closest earthly associates. These were the people that were right there with him. Jesus tells them a truth, and they are offended, or grumbling anyway, about what Jesus had just said. We also see in Matthew 13, 54 through 57, Jesus comes to his hometown. He began teaching in their synagogue. They were astonished and said, where did this man get this wisdom and these miraculous powers? Is this not the carpenter's son? Is not his mother Mary and his brothers James and Joseph and Simon and Judas? And his sisters, are they not all with us? Where then did this man get all these things? And they took offense at him. Now, these are his acquaintances. We've seen his close friends, his closest associates, didn't quite grasp what he was saying, and Jesus asked, is this causing you to stumble? Now he's in his hometown with acquaintances, and they were taking offense at him teaching the truth. And then, of course, there's the group of opponents that Jesus dealt with. In Matthew 15, 10 through 11, after Jesus called the crowd to him, he said to them, hear and understand, it's not what enters the mouth that defiles the man, but what proceeds out of the mouth. This defiles the man. Then his disciples came and said to him, do you know the Pharisees were offended when they heard this statement? Again, Jesus teaching the truth was causing some people to take offense, probably indignant here. Then we've got 2 others that I want us to take a look at before we look at the summary. In Romans 14, 20 and 21, the Greek word here is proskoma, which is a stumbling or an occasion of stumbling. Do not tear down the word of God or work of God for the sake of food. All these things indeed are clean, but they are evil for the man who eats and gives offense. It is good not to eat meat or drink wine or do anything by which your brother stumbles. This and the next one we're going to look at talk about us doing things that are legal or proper for us, but yet some people take offense to it, and it might cause them to lose their faith. So we need to be careful in that area. The food example was used again in 1 Corinthians 8 through 10, where he says, food will not commend us to God. We're neither the worse if we do not eat or the better if we do. But take care this liberty of yours does not somehow become a stumbling block to the weak. For if someone sees you who have knowledge dining in an idol's temple, will not his conscience, if he's weak, be strengthened to eat things sacrificed to idols? Again, we don't really have that issue in Greenwood in 2023 about idol temples and food, but the principle has application in many areas, where if we know someone has a weak spot, so to speak, we're not to flaunt our liberty in front of them in that area. So, what do we in 2023 do with all this? Well, the first thing is, don't let anyone else offend you in the sense that it causes you to stumble, lose your faith. That was the first thing we looked at, was that people, there are folks out there who are going to try to cause that to happen. But you control that. Yes, it would be better for them if they had that millstone around their neck. But as far as you're concerned, you need to be on guard. And if there's people in your life or things in your life that are causing you to stumble, cast them away. That's the idea about cutting off your hand, your foot, and plucking out your eye. Don't let it happen. You're in charge of that. The next one, when offended. When you are offended, indignant or displeased, that kind, be angry, but do not sin, as we're told in Ephesians. It's okay if you don't like seeing Sam Smith's satanic thing on the Grammys. Click, turn it off. But don't let someone like that influence you to imitate how he behaves. How they behave. Sam Smith uses they as his pronoun. I don't do that. But when you're seeing something like that, it's okay to be mad about it. Don't get to the point that it causes you to sin, and walk away from it. The next one, you're going to offend, cause displeasure, that is, to some people through God's word. And that's what it's designed to do. Jesus said, when he was told that what he said had offended the Pharisees, he didn't say, well, maybe I should go retract that. People need to hear the truth. And if they don't want to hear the truth, then telling them the truth is going to be displeasure, is going to offend. Next, do not become a stumbling block to the weak. Of course, in that area, you have to know who someone, or you need to know what the weak spot is with someone else. But we don't need to go through life trying to tweak other people's beak just for the sake of it. But we do need to tell the truth and help strengthen the weak. And then the final point I have here for us this morning is, if possible, so far as it depends upon you, be at peace with all men. Again, I'm not saying compromise the truth, but you shouldn't be someone that sets out intentionally to offend, to make someone else angry or indignant. That ought not be your personality. And it's real easy for any of us, me included, online, to fire off a nice little bam. I got them. Some of you have put on Facebook that you've been hacked. And I say, okay, I want to make sure that if I get the private message from this person trying to tell me about some government grant, that's the one that's going around these days, that when I make them go cry to their mama, I'm not making you go cry to your mama. And I have some fun with those folks from time to time. I don't mind making them mad. But anyway, those are the points I had for you today. Let's throw it open for discussion. Any thoughts that this generated with you? Kurt.
You have alluded to things that we get on social media,
Yes.
say, or whatever it may be. That is an area I personally think that we should be very, very, very careful what we say. Maybe
Right. Kurt's point, if you can't hear him in the back, is that we need to be very careful on social media because not only people that we know, but folks that we don't know, or people who know we're a member of this congregation and they might wonder why we're posting something like that. I go through, I've got a couple of sites, and those of you who follow my Facebook page know that I post funnies. You have no idea how many I look at and I say, I don't want my name associated with that. I mean, a bunch every day that I see, and I say, no, that wouldn't look good on me. It would not look good as a member of this congregation or as a Christian to be posting that. Other thoughts? Yes. Yes. If you didn't hear Paula's point, it was that from looking at this list that's on the board, sometimes it is proper to offend someone. And when is that? When you're teaching the truth. And that's the examples from Jesus. When he was in his hometown and people were taking offense at him, he wasn't going around, say, hey, you're fat, ugly, your mom dresses you funny. That wasn't what he was doing. He was telling them the truth. And they didn't want to hear it. Yes, Mark.
Yeah, to add on those 2 points, that's that Matthew 10:34 business of bringing the sword. There will be times when peace is not attainable because you must bear the sword. And we need to be very careful about righteous indignation, using that as a tool to bludgeon people over the head. I mean, but the fact of the matter is, he goes on from verse 34 there to say, it's going to be within families.
Yes.
That this offense occurs because you're standing for the truth of what I presented. And so there's a little bit of good with the bad in regards to this business of being offensive.
But back to that last point on the board, as far as it depends on you, be at peace with all men. And to the point of Jesus, saying, cut off your hand, cut off your foot, pluck out your eye, or whatever. There are some relationships, some acquaintances that we probably need to cut out. There are some folks on Twitter and Facebook that I blocked because after reading a few of their posts, I don't think there's anything they're ever going to say that's going to build me up, enlighten me, but it could make me angry, and who needs to volunteer for that? There's enough in life. Yes, Grant.
There's a lot of things in this world, just tangible things, tools, if you will, everything from, the spectrum's broad. It can be everything from, a firearm to, a cell phone, food, a motorcycle, any one of these things that we have that we make for ourselves that are tools that we can use for good and bad. But also they have the ability to draw out of us levels of frustration or anger or emotional responses at the same time. Which is why I don't ride motorcycles anymore. And that's something that phones and all the different applications that we have available to us do a really good job of. And we need to know ourselves when using these, just so they don't try to elicit that emotional response from us, and in ways we can get addicted to certain things, and just use them with caution. And that can be for anything.
It can.
Say that with food, with everything in moderation, I suppose. Know what it can do to us, and just use caution.
Good point. Any other thoughts? Okay, we will adjourn to our classes.